Google Drive is one of the few Google products I actually quite like. It's not perfect or anything, and yeah, Dropbox is fine, but I've had a good time overall with Google Drive. It's fairly priced, it's easy to use, it's reliable, works on everything, and of course, Google has to ruin that for all of us. Despite the fact that Drive's had a pretty easy to use accessible API for a long time, it seems like Google's changed their mind on what we should actually be able to do with it, and going forward, it doesn't seem like many apps are going to have access at all. To be very, very clear, this will not affect your Google Drive account that you go to via drive.google.com. But if you use your Google Drive account in other apps for things like syncing, note-taking, tracking, all sorts of stuff, that's probably going away. Because as usual, Google's making life much, much harder for devs. And IA Writer just got hit hard, and they're not the only ones. So probably time we talk about this, right? Before we get to Google interrupting developers, we need a quick interruption from today's sponsor, me. We're doing a lot more of these breaking news videos, and as much as I love the current sponsors, believe me, I do, not all of them are down to get these really quick turnaround times. So if you're okay with not approving a script way ahead and getting a discounted rate in order to get into these breaking news videos, hit me up. YouTube at t3.gg. Anyways, our Android app is frozen in Carbonite. If this was just some random app dev, that'd be one thing, but it's not. IA Writer is one of the best apps for just writing things. It's awesome. It works on web and mobile and even tablets. I specifically learned about it as a good way to write things on a tablet. And it was a great way for me to get out blog posts back in the day when I still wrote. It didn't just yap. Great tool, phenomenal team, really talented devs. And they're not able to update their Android app right now. And the reason is incredibly dumb. After 7 years of trying, the most recent struggle with Google proved that we need to change course on our adventure in the Android galaxy. A couple of months ago, Google changed its API policy and it revoked IA Writer's access to Google Drive on Android. By freezing up Android's main storage option, our app was frozen in Carbonite. It still lived, but we couldn't move forward before resolving it. So this means is they no longer were able to give Google Drive access to new versions of the app. So if they push an update, Google Drive is broken for it. In order to allow users to access their Google Drive on their phones, we had to rewrite the privacy statements, update documents, and pass a series of security checks, all while facing a barrage of new and ever-shifting requirements. This is the publishing on someone else's store experience, but especially on Google. I know that the Apple App Store gets a lot of shit because their policies are really strict, but their policies are strict and consistent. They don't change them very often. Where on Android, they don't enforce them consistently and they change them all the time. So an app that's compliant today might just not be tomorrow. And it's a mess. It's an absolute mess. And it seems like other things going on at Google are now making this even harder, both for the people maintaining the Android App Store and Play Store, as well as for the developers trying to build things for it. Here's an email from April. Google sends these almost weekly, every time you need to go through a stack of links and things. Sometimes you end up in a forum with a group of desperate devs talking about quitting Android. Yeah, it's bad. I've been there before for really dumb things. It's rough. You must meet policy requirements to access certain Drive APIs. You can tell from the inconsistent font sizes, the quality of shit that you're getting here. And yes, this is actually what Google's official emails look like. It's so hard to know if you're being phished or not because phishing emails look more real than Google's official ones. If you do not verify your app will be subject to an ongoing 100 user limit. What does limiting it to 100 users do for fucking anybody? Verify your Play Console developer account now. Your window to complete account verification for the Play Console developer account, IA Inc., is now open. If you don't complete verification by your deadline, your developer profile and app will be removed from Google Play. If this was the only time Google did stuff like this, that'd be one thing. Even something like VLC, which, yeah, sure, I'm a bit of a hater of, even they got hit with something like this. They tweeted back in March, if you wonder why we can't update the VLC on Android app, it's because Google refuses to let us update. Either they have to give Google their private signing keys, or they have to stop updating for old versions of Android TV, which is what most Android TVs are running because nobody, like even Android phones are barely up to date. Android TVs never get fucking updates. Nobody cares. And after 6 months of back and forth with Videoland, one of the biggest open source projects ever, they finally found a way to get their app deployed again. But the fact that even VLC gets hit with this shit shows the state of things at Google with the App Store, and it's rough. Play Store is a shit show. Also, the details they give us here on the IA Writer thing are insane. 5 months and 55 updates later, it can't be too far from now. Let's make sure we verify everything as expected, then send the documents and the passport scans. Then we'll be good, right? They make you send a passport scan if your app happens to use the Google Drive API. What? And even then, it still takes forever if it will even be approved. By September, we thought we had honored our side of the new agreement, but on the very day we expected to get our access back, Google altered the deal. The classic quote, altered the deal, pray I don't alter it further. We were told that read-only access to Google Drive would suit our writing app better than the desired read and write access. That's right, read-only for a writing app. Google doesn't want developers using Google Drive. This makes it very clear. To be fair, Google doesn't really like developers or understand what they need anyways, but what the fuck? An app named IA Writer being told that they only need read-only access. What? That's like a food supplier talking to a Brazilian steakhouse and saying, you know what you guys need? Vegetables. No more meat. Not allowed. Come on. Why did you think you needed that? The fuck? This is insane. After a series of updates following exactly Google's playbook, they still want more privacy policy changes. But then our customers get Google Drive back. Right? And then here, we reviewed your submission for Project Net IA Writer. Your application still does not appear to use minimum scopes. You requested the following scope, auth drive. But based on the following information you provided, we believe the following scope might be a better fit. Drive.read only. Are you fucking kidding? Perhaps you think that you were treated unfairly. We point out this is not what we had or what our users wanted. Google seemed to alter the deal yet again. In order to get our users full access to their Google Drive on their devices, we now need to pass a yearly CASA, which is a Cloud Application Security Assessment audit. This requires hiring a third-party vendor like KPMG. What? I sense Synology stock going up fast. If you guys don't know Synology, they make network-attached storage devices. It's what I use to manage a ton of my content. One of my favorite things that Synology has is a Cloud Sync app. The Cloud Sync app lets you sign in with things like Backblaze, Dropbox, and Google Drive. And for about a year, all of my content was managed by dragging and dropping onto a special folder on my Synology that would auto-sync it to Google. A company like Synology, that's a massive $100+ million fucking business, already has security assessment suites and teams and probably works with third-party vendors already. So for them, Google Drive support's probably still going to be there. Might still get killed, but I'm guessing they'll be fine. Whereas anyone trying to compete with them, any open source project trying to build something similar, fucked. They're gone. They're dead. This is an unintentional power shrinkage towards the most powerful people who can afford to do all those things. And a small app by a small dedicated team like IA Writer, they can't do this now. And if a big company wants to compete with them, they absolutely can because they can deal with this third-party bullshit. While I understand Google's goal of trying to make Drive safe and private so you don't have random apps stealing your information through it, this is a fucking mess. And like, how much does read-only actually prevent? On the off chance that IA Writer was actually spyware, if they can read my Google Drive, that is pretty much just as bad as if they can write to it. If they get access to all my private information and they're malicious, how much worse is it if they can write to? Let's be realistic. It makes no sense to restrict on the levels that Google's restricting on. So even with my best attempt at understanding their goals, this is fucking bullshit. They're not the only ones, by the way. Panic, who I absolutely adore, is being hit too. We'll cover that in just a moment. The cost that IA Writer has dealt with, including all internal hours, amounts to about 1 or 2 months of revenue that we would have to pay to one of Google's corporate amigos. An indie company handing over a month's worth of revenue to a big four firm like KPMG for a pretty much meaningless scan. And of course, this would be a recurring annual expense. More cash for Google's partners, while small developers like us foot the bill for Android's deeply ingrained security shortcomings. I will say I don't see this necessarily as like Google trying to cash grab for their partners. Don't attribute to malice what you can attribute to stupidity. This is Google just being dumb. They found the cheapest path to theoretically make things more secure because Google's always in the middle of security issues. And if this is the path they came up with to make Google Drive secure again, it's a stupid shit show, but that's what's happening here. They're not doing this because they think they can make a lot of money for these partners. Realistically speaking, 1 month of your revenue is just not any meaningful amount to Google. Like, for the PR damage that this can do to them, the amount of money they can make or their partners can make through it is nothing. To Google, a third-party vendor security audit is just a Tuesday. So they're not thinking about this. People who wrote this policy, they're not thinking about in terms of how this affects indie devs. They're just thinking about it from their narrow perspective of being Google. So I wouldn't say this is Google intentionally trying to squeeze cash for their partners so much as Google's just fucking stupid and incompetent. This is a funny line. As we Googled our new situation, it became clear this wasn't just our battle. Developers everywhere were facing similar bureaucratic entanglements, all designed to benefit Google's partners while squeezing the life out of smaller companies. Here's a quote that they have. What's the source on this one? This is a Reddit user that has been dealing with a similar restriction. I finally completed and passed the assessment. Overall, it took me about 60 to 80 hours of my time, and the process itself spanned 3 to 4 months, with 25 to 30 back and forth requests of varying complexity. It was awful, and if it's not streamlined next year, I'll be dropping the permission from my app and going another route. So it's normal. Seems like we have to bite the bullet then. After all, we've been doing this for 7 years. We have tens of thousands of users. We've invested hundreds of thousands to make this work. And so it looks like we shall double our efforts. This battle to give our customers access to their Google Drive is only the latest in a series of clashes we've had with the empire. Developing on Android is a daily worsening struggle with red tape, inconsistent device performance, App Store search performance gaming, and rampant piracy. Yeah, the Android App Store and Play Store is such a disaster. It's like all the worst parts of Google search, but with none of the investment. It's insanity. And yeah, piracy is a huge issue on Android, and Google does not help much. Every time we think we've overcome one hurdle, another two pop up. It's an exhausting process that saps our resources, delays updates, and damages our reputation. Meanwhile, the negative reviews keep piling up for problems that are out of our control. That's not the only problem, though. There are certain devices that cause trouble. To fix the bugs, you need to buy the device. Customers demand that, and we often did. Below you can see the 12,000 different device types that were using IA Writer in 2017. That's not 12,000 users. That's 12,000 types of devices. That's insanity to have to worry about all these different places that your app can run. Developing for Android, you navigate an asteroid field. Bugs surface across thousands of device types, Android versions, and flavors, from One UI to MyUI, Oxygen OS, Pixel Experience, you name it. So remember when Pixels were vanilla Android? Now it's the Pixel Experience? What the fuck? Before anyone says this is the price of an open OS, well, we don't have this problem on Windows. Okay, Windows isn't open though. Regardless, put them in. We could just comply. We could pay the security auditing firm. We could surrender more of our revenue and dig ourselves deeper into the red, and then accept the next forced change in the next one. We could try to write our own framework for payment to avoid piracy. Why would we when no one wants to pay for it? And then what? Where does it end? Hiring someone to game our app reviews? Yeah, the fact that like the review race means if you want to rank above people who are making fake versions of your app and paying scammers to give fake reviews, the best way to win is to pay your own fake reviewers. What the fuck? It's such a shitty arms race. I feel so bad for these devs. It sucks to be an Android dev nowadays, especially if you actually care about your users. If you're an Android dev just trying to load phones up with spyware, you're probably the average Android dev, to be fair. But also, like, the ones who care are being beaten. And this is the biggest reason why Android apps suck. It's not because Android's bad, iOS good. It's not because the developers are paid less or there's less money. The biggest thing is you are disincentivized by Google from making a great app because every step along the way fucking sucks. As long as we sell to Android end consumers, the economics of continuing development on Android is an ever-tightening force choke. Bit by bit, the control over our app's functionality, quality, and finances are being taken away from us. If we continue down the current path, we damage our relationship with users, we taint our reputation, we lose money, nerves, and time. So as of today, we're not just accepting our frozen and carbonite fate, we're embracing it. We're going to take the app offline. That genuinely sucks. I like this app a lot. I used it on an Android tablet back in the day. I still here and there will pull it up on iOS. It's a beautiful app, and this team has put so much effort in, and Google has destroyed it for them. We know this decision will disappoint our loyal Android users, and we share your frustrations. After 7 years of continuous investment, this is way more painful for us than it is for any of you. I don't love this wording, although it's true. Telling your users that things hurt you more than them never reads right. Like we're with you, this sucks, is what I would have put here. Regardless, I am very sympathetic to their experience here. It's important to understand why many devs choose not to engage with the empire. You can't win that battle. They do as they please, unless you're Epic, and then you can sometimes win, but still. Existing users will keep their access and will push critical updates when necessary, if the empire allows it. but new features are off the table for now. Support will be friendly as always, but we have to be pragmatic. What if he doesn't survive? He's worth a lot to me. IA Writer for Android might return in the future, perhaps in a different chapter for this saga, where it can be developed in a more controlled environment. We are working towards a setup where organizations can pay us directly for all our software. In a B2B setup, the Android hardware ecosystem may be economical and manageable, and then we can go back to sponsoring single license users and their unruly pirate friends. Until that day comes, IA Writer for Android will remain frozen in Carbonite, waiting for the right time to reawaken. In the meantime, we're focusing on projects that drive our business forward, finalizing a major Windows 11 update, enhancing IA Writer for Mac, iOS, and iPadOS, preparing to launch the web sharing for IA Presenter, and releasing the iOS and iPadOS app. I was so sure they had an iPad app. I was so sure they did. Maybe that's for IA Presenter. I'm pretty sure IA Writer does, though. Regardless, I have so much sympathy. Just again, to confirm, it's not them alone, I'm going to go over Panic's recent post. End of the road for Google Drive and Transmit. If you aren't familiar with Panic, you should fix that. First off, just the domain should be enough for you to get it, panic.com. They redo their homepage? They did. Is Hurdling a new game they're making? It is. Oh boy. This is stunning. Oh shit. That looks beautiful. So if you're not familiar with Panic, they're a game publisher known primarily for Firewatch and Untitled Goose Game, but they do a lot of other fun games too. They make the Playdate, which is a handheld, weird little console. It's cute as hell. But they also make desktop software for devs, Mac software primarily. And there's a couple programs here that used to be really popular. Not quite as much nowadays, but Prompt was a huge app for doing SSH and connecting to an external terminal on your iOS devices. It's like how you would do dev, in quotes, on mobile. But also Transmit and Nova, which were and still kind of are really popular solutions for devs on Mac. This was an IDE that was native, really cool. It's been trumped since, but Nova was dope. And Transmit is still one of the best SFTP and FTP clients for Mac for syncing across lots of different things. One of those things was Google Drive, and it no longer is. End of the road for Google Drive and Transmit. We never like removing functionality from our apps. We especially don't like doing it when it's due to circumstances beyond our control. But sometimes, rarely even, it can happen. And so please take note. At some unknown point in the future, Google will revoke Transmit's access to Google Drive. Sometime after that, we'll be releasing updates to Transmit and Nova that remove the ability to create Google Drive connections. Transmit is still in active development and no other connection types are affected. But why? Google has a new set of policies that require apps that connect to Google Drive to go through expensive, time-consuming annual reviews. And this has made it extremely difficult for us to reasonably maintain Google Drive access. You may have seen IA Writer's announcement. What's that? Never heard of it. 30 minutes into this video about it. You might have seen their announcement that they're stopping development of their Android version for similar reasons. Our experience was different, but our circumstances are similar. While Google Drive may not be the most popular option for connection and transmit, we know many users rely on it, and we often use it here at Panic to send and receive files from game devs that we work with. It's not a decision that we took lightly, and it was the result of much debate and anguish in the office. But rest assured, we looked at every angle. Hopefully this will help explain more. Here's more background for the curious, people watching this video. In 2019, Google announced additional security checks to apps with full access to Drive. Shortly after, they prevented Transmit from authorizing new Drive users. We submitted Transmit to Google for review and waited for months without hearing anything back. Eventually, by reaching out through friends of friends of friends to find someone inside Google who could help, we got in contact with a Google employee who was very helpful in getting the process started. We went through review, and our access was restored in early 2020. Fortunately, we were never able to get Google to approve Nova, which is their text editor. For the next couple years, the annual re-review was pretty straightforward. However, in December 2023, Google again disabled Transmit and emailed us, explaining that we would need to complete a Cloud Application Security Assessment security review. The review found no security issues with Transmit, but it was an incredibly lengthy process. It involved registering with a security lab, running a vulnerability scanner on Transmit source code, and filling out a long form. Between each step, we had to wait days before we'd hear back from the lab, causing the process to take nearly a month. This is a company that knows what they're doing. They're a game publisher. They know how to deal with every weird app store because their job is taking your game and getting it working on Xbox, on PlayStation, on Epic Games Store, on GOG, on Steam, and dealing with all these companies and their weird policies around this shit. So they're no strangers to having to do a weird review process. And they're still saying that this sucks. They're still saying it took them over a month. That's not over, nearly a month. That's still insane for a company that does this a lot. In March, they were reapproved, but we were told that we would now need to pass the check annually. At this point, we began to question if the yearly process was worth it. Between the weeks of waiting, submitting the required documentation, and the process of scanning the code took a significant amount of time from our engineers. For example, Google provided a Docker image for running the scanner, but it didn't work. Tell me it's not the most Google thing in the world that Google gives you a Docker image to scan your source code, and it doesn't actually fucking work. That's the most Google thing I've ever heard. We had to spend more than a week debugging and fixing the Docker image they sent them. And because the scanner found no problems, it didn't result in any improvements to transmit. No one benefited from this process. Not Google, not Panic, and not our users. Okay, to be fair, the security company that they worked with, the security lab, they benefited. They made some money. But no one else does. Yeah, and fair point from Naman in chat. They've launched hardware. Do you know how hard it is to get hardware launched? It's way harder than launching an app, unless Google decides they want to make it hard for you. As a small independent dev, losing this time for no benefit is a huge cost. That week could have been better spent improving our products. But even so, at the time, we resigned ourselves to the yearly checks. We didn't want to let our users down, and hopefully, now that we had experience with it, the scanner would be easier to run next year. But then a couple months later, Google completely removed the option to scan our own code. Instead, to keep access to Drive, we would now have to pay one of Google's business partners to conduct the review manually. They promised a discounted minimum price, but no maximum price. We realized that either we'd be most likely paying somebody else a chunk of cash to run the same scanner we were running, or our bill would end up much higher. These ever-shifting requirements and expenses are finally catching up to third parties. Other products have discontinued Google Drive support or come up with interesting workarounds with various limitations that don't work for all users. Ultimately, we think any workaround strategy is too risky and may result in banned accounts, and we definitely don't want to be responsible for anyone getting banned. There's actually a thing I think about a lot because my YouTube account is a Google account. And if I use the wrong app and Google thinks that I'm a spammer or something, I lose the income not just for myself, but for a team of 4. So the thought of my Google account being banned is something that keeps me fucking up at night. And for a developer to have to think about, like, we can add this feature back that people want, but it might ruin someone's livelihood if their account gets banned. That's terrifying. And this is the thing that happens to fucking real people too. The guy who made Terraria, which is the 2D Minecraft game that was really, really popular in late 2010s. The guy who made this game was partnered with Google to get it onto Stadia, which was their game streaming platform at the time. And he canceled it, which was probably a huge contract because they randomly locked his Google account, his personal Google account that had his media, his apps, and everything he had been doing on Google his whole life. Google never told him why. He exhausted all of his internal contacts, including the people he worked with for the Stadia stuff, and he burned the whole relationship with them because they locked his account for no reason. Google will hurt the success of their own products if it follows their bullshit policies to hurt a given user. It's actually fucking insane. The fact that this could happen, that a developer of a well-loved game, a very public figure, could just lose their entire Gmail history of 15 years because of a bad Google policy that was never fucking clarified. It's unbelievable that this can happen. But that's the way Google does things. Bans are bans. We're very sorry. In short, with all these factors in play, we've decided that we will not attempt to renew the Google Drive access for Transmit once it expires. We'll miss it too. As I said before, they're actually using it regularly. It sucks that they want the feature and they can't do it. We will instead focus our efforts on other features and products. We know that this situation, to put it in simplified terms, kind of sucks. If Google ever revises their security policies to be more in reach for a small software company like Panic, we will definitely take a second look. Chat's summarizing my thoughts pretty well here. I would literally choose iCloud Drive over Google Drive. I hate iCloud Drive so much, and I think I would too. I'm thankful Dropbox is in a decent state because I use it for everything right now. I'm so thankful I moved to Dropbox earlier this year for weird pricing reasons. But Jesus Christ, I got nothing else. Thank you guys as always. Stop using Google Drive, and until next time, peace, nerds.